Okay.
We're live.
Cool. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Hope. I'm back again. For those of you who might be aware, I was also doing the ACLU Youth TV, so it's nice to be back again in this digital format, pretending that I am a professional YouTuber. But for those of you who don't know, my name is Hope. I am the youth organizer at the ACLU of Wisconsin, and I just wanted to thank you if you're watching live or if you're not watching live, for joining us during this Know Your Rights training concerning demonstrators' rights. So why are we doing this now? A couple of things. First things first, for those of you who might be watching this and you're like, ACLU, I have no idea what that is. This is the first time I've heard about it. This might be your face. Essentially, we have an unspoken model that goes, we the people, is really based deep in the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. We understand that those two documents were written by people who who weren't aware of the scope of how America would look, and so that document can be a barrier to some and a pass to others. And so the ACLU of Wisconsin, particularly, is the referee for the civil rights and civil liberties of Wisconsinites, but the ACLU National seeks to do that on a national level at the United States of America. So we're doing this demonstrators' rights training in order to prepare folks specifically for the DNC that's coming up August 17th through August 20th. Even though it's still in the digital format, it's going to be in the digital format, there still is a national security concern associated with it. And so we wanted to prepare demonstrators who might be thinking about demonstrating within these spaces, the security zones, prepare them for the types of things that they might encounter and things that they should know, because insert the NBC, old NBC, the more you know, Starfall, the more you know, the more you're able to protect yourself and others. So trying to spread that information as widely as we can. So generally, what are your rights? This is common questions I get about where people can protest and kinds of things you might need to protest. And truthfully, your rights to protest and demonstrate are the strongest in what are known as public forum areas. So that is public streets, public sidewalks, and usually parks. And you typically have the right to speak out in other public forums that are government property, such as plazas, and also any designated public speech zones. Those were air quotes. You can't see them because of my Zoom background. But those public forum spaces are your best bet in terms of exercising your First Amendment right. You are allowed to demonstrate and protest and, exercise your First Amendment rights on your own personal and private property, because that's yours. But if you were to do it on another person's private property, you have to make sure that you have their permission in order to do that. So that can create a restriction in that space. Additionally, a question I get is, do I need a permit? Well, no. Short answer, you don't need a permit to exercise your First Amendment right. However, certain cities, municipalities, other local governing bodies might suggest that you use a permit for things like parades or marches. And additionally, making the note that if you are obstructing traffic in a certain way, police officers, law enforcement may be able to ask you to move off of a street or off of a sidewalk to let others pass for safety reasons. But again, this changes city by city, county by county. So I encourage anybody who's looking to demonstrate to look up the rules and the ordinances within their community. You can usually find this on like your city governance page. And it'll kind of tell you the kinds of rights you have in terms of protesting or exercising your freedom of speech. Also, certain types of events, like I said, might require permits. So if you're thinking of doing a march or even including things like amplified sound, there might be permits that are suggested, required. but still permits should not be used as a prohibitive measure. So if there is a fee associated with requiring a permit, there has to be some sort of lever, some sort of what workaround for people who won't be able to afford those. Because again, permits cannot be used as blockades against exercising your First Amendment rights. Again, police can't use procedures and permits procedures to prevent a protest. Also, permits should not be denied because the event is controversial or express unpopular views. So making sure you know, again, permits might be required for certain events, but they do not not curb. They should not be used as a deterrent for people who are trying to exercise their First Amendment right. Other things you might not know if you've gone to a protest or maybe are thinking about protesting but haven't been in a situation where there's like multi-issues being protested about or demonstrated about, is that counter protesters also have freedom of speech, First Amendment rights. So if there's a situation where there's two opposing demonstrating groups, the police have a right to make sure that these groups are able to do so safely and not in a manner that might cause harm towards one another, and also equally. So they can't over police one group and under police another. It has to be a very similar amount of law enforcement and facilitating that freedom of speech space. In terms of photographing, if you are lawfully present on a public space, you are allowed to photograph, videotape anything in public view. That includes police officers, especially police officers. Police officers are public officials, and you are able to record them, either audio or visually record them in any interaction that they are in. And that's across the board in any state. In some states, there are specifications as to whether or not you need another party's consent for recording, specifically audio. There are no such rules or laws in place in Wisconsin currently, so you are allowed to do that. But for police, you are allowed to audio and video record them in any state without their permission. It is your right and your duty to record the police. And an extra note that some people might not be aware of: profanity is not an excuse to curb anybody's freedom of speech. So just because it doesn't sound nice doesn't mean that somebody can tell you can't say it. So with that said, there are still some things that you might want to keep in mind if you are demonstrating, especially if it's your first time demonstrating. It's really exciting, but again, I just want to urge folks to do your research. Make sure you know as much as possible about the ordinances, about the cause that you are supporting. Know as much as possible going into the demonstration. It will do nothing but help you and aid you. But on that note, if you are a first-time demonstrator, prepare yourself. Make sure you have items that you can use to record whatever situations that might come up. So a notepad is really good in case like your phone is unavailable, you turned your cell phone off, pens, Sharpies. Having your smartphone is a really great tool because it is almost like real-time reporting. They're portable. You can keep them with you. But the reason why I'm encouraging like having more tactile methods or other methods is just, frankly, cell phones can get taken. They can get confiscated, unfortunately, illegally. And so you want to have a backup option. But also, there are other surveillance tactics that are going to be used and have been used in order to surveillance protesters. So a smartphone might not be the best option all the time, especially when we're talking about things like stingrays. So on that note, it's really important to make sure you use an end-to-end encrypted texting app like Signal or Telegram to make phone calls or make text messages to, people that you need to stay in contact with, because we know that stingrays have been used in order to track protesters. In some cases, it has been used to access the actual text messages. Even though MPD, Milwaukee Police Department, states that they haven't been using it for that purpose, it has been used for that purpose in other areas across the country. So just make sure you have your things locked up and really safe. Encrypt your phone. There are tutorials to do that online, but also make sure that you have a numeric passcode. Don't rely on your fingerprint or facial recognition, because those methods, those two methods specifically, can be used without your consent. Let me rephrase that. They can be used without your knowledge, right? If somebody gets a hold of your phone, they can hold it up to your face and unlock your phone. Or if you're in a a compromising position, maybe you don't have full access of your hands, somebody can use your hands and unlock your phone. So make sure that you have a passcode to ensure that somebody does not get access to your phone who you don't want to. Additionally, in this time of COVID, make sure you have your mask, any other additional PPE you need, hand sanitizer to keep yourself safe, and also a list of attorney contacts and possibly media contacts are also useful in the event that things go south and you need support in maintaining your rights. A quick note about recording and live streaming. I do want to let folks know, while live streaming is really great to get real-time information out to folks, also be careful, because there are reports and there have been reports and documentations that showing that law enforcement is using live streams in order to track people and their whereabouts, and there have been protesters that have been visited at their houses by law enforcement through these sort of tracking methods. So if you're going to live stream, know that that comes with a risk, so don't live stream anything you wouldn't want the police to find out about. Also, if you are recording, try to record to a server, so that if your phone is taken, or if there is some police misconduct and things are erased off your phone, that you have a secondary copy, because there have been cases of people recording police misconduct and then police deleting that, but fortunately they had it recorded someplace else. Additionally, these are just questions. I'm just going to leave these up for a little bit. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but again, the more information you know, the better you know how to protect yourself. So if you're demonstrating, make sure you are exploring these questions. You don't have to have all of these answers before you demonstrate, right? Like, you don't have to be the know-it-all, being like, what is this doing? What is my role? What do you need me to do? You don't necessarily have to walk into a demonstration asking those questions, but it's helpful to know, so that if anything happens, you can be prepared, right? You know who you can contact if something happens, especially with lawyers or bail funds. But also, if you want to be more involved, or you want to see your demonstration turn into a movement, a long-term movement, you can begin to think about what is the next action to build or support power, so really think about these kinds of questions as you are organizing and demonstrating your First Amendment right. After the action, make sure you leave with whomever you came with, or you do kind of like a buddy check, a buddy system, to make sure people are safe. And other things are really helpful tips. Another thing that I'll share again during this COVID time is maybe having an extra pair of clothes, and after the demonstration you can change those clothes, especially if you're going to go to an after event, just to make sure you're keeping yourself safe. I really want to stress, I can't stress enough how much of a sort of a dually oppressive time, I don't know, for lack of a better word, that we're living in. And you need to watch both your civil rights and civil liberties, but also your health during this time. So make sure you're keeping yourself safe in both of those situations. So on to the DNC. I don't know how many of you have seen this. There was a press release that came out literally minutes prior to this. So some of this information is slightly different, but not really. We have a document that Molly's going to be sharing. It's a Google folder that has like the ordinances as well as the soft zones that were then established. As you can see here, this has slightly been changed, but only slightly. But it also contains information about permits and other information about prohibitive items. And so the press release is also in there, the press release from today, excuse me, but also the prior documents, the city ordinances. So the soft zone is essentially just a security zone around the Wisconsin Center that the DNC is going to be held at. Even though Joe Biden isn't going to be coming, there are still going to be other people who are coming into town to speak, specifically Wisconsin politicians. And so there still will be soft zones. The main things you need to know about these soft zones is what happens within them. So the city is suggesting that you get a permit in order to access the parade route. Thank you, Molly, for sharing that. The parade route that they have, if you're looking at the document from the press release, you'll notice the parade route is in green. Do you need a permit? Again, the answer is no. Freedom of speech. You are able to exercise your First Amendment right in a public forum space. But I want you to think of this permit process as having a restaurant, having a reservation at a restaurant, even though we can't go to those during peak dinner times, or even, yeah, like right now, how we have to have reservations to ensure like traffic flow is thought about. You could be able to access the parade route without having a permit, but if there's somebody else who has a permit for that time, it might increase your likelihood of encountering law enforcement because somebody else has that permit. So just think about it like having a reservation at those restaurants is not required to have a reservation, but sometimes it can be helpful. So take that information as you will and do as you would like with that. Additionally, things about the soft zone are the prohibited items that you will not be able to have in these areas. They will be confiscated. And the list is more exhaustive on the ordinance, but you'll notice on the press release document released today, it's a little more pared down. But some things that I just wanted to pull out because they might be things that you might have on your person and completely forget. Glass bottles, that includes if they're empty or full, will be prohibited. Tennis balls, aerosol cans, any rope, cable, and longer than 6 inches, any lock, like without limitation, any lock, padlock, any locking device, or umbrella with a metal tip. So things that I wouldn't immediately be like, wow, that I can't bring that, but according to the security restrictions of this event, these are some of the prohibited items. So check out our folder, our resource folder for the full list to make sure if you are entering into the soft zone to demonstrate, you don't have any of these items on you. Also letting you know if you have a larger bag, it might be cause for suspicion. So just, watch out on that front. Not to say like don't bring your bags, but just letting you know, giving you a heads up on that. So that's the DNC. And let's talk a little bit about police encounters and how they can look during demonstrations. Also, if there are questions popping up, I know some people might be having some questions. If you're watching this on Facebook, you might have questions. I'm going to have a question section at the end. I just want to make sure that I'm sharing the information, and then we'll have questions during the question portion. So thank you for your patience on that. But police encounters, ideally, the police would facilitate public assembly, right? Like they wouldn't be deterrents to that. They would make sure that the public assembly can happen as peacefully and unrestricted as possible. I say peacefully, recognizing that there is a dichotomy, right? Like some people want peaceful to look a certain way. But there are not legal definitions, but there is a concept for what a peaceful protest looks versus a non-peaceful protest. So I'm just sharing that to say, like, my definition of peaceful might not be the law enforcement definition of peaceful, but that's the game we play. So law enforcement would ideally facilitate that. They wouldn't prohibit that. They would make sure that protesters were safe from violent factions, or violent situations, right? Especially in the case of maybe like a rogue group coming in and sort of trying to overtake the protest. But they also should be able to de-escalate with the least amount of force necessary, right? So police shouldn't come in immediately with all of this force that we're seeing in some cities. There should be steps in between that, if possible, to de-escalate the situation. But the most important thing, I think, law enforcement should be responsible for during demonstrations is being accountable. We're obviously, like, a lot of the demonstrations we're seeing coming up is around this issue of police accountability. But again, that's the crux of the matter. Like, police should be accountable for their actions, and it is within the rights of people to, question and hold law enforcement accountable for actions that might have caused harm to people, and they need to explain why those actions were taken. So on that note, if there is a situation where law enforcement needs to disperse a crowd, or shut down the protest, number one, that should be the last resort possible. There should be steps taken before that. And there needs to be clear and present danger to either the people demonstrating or, the public, as it were. But again, if they're doing this, they have to make sure they're taking steps to make sure that people can comply reasonably. It can't be like, get out of here, and then 5 seconds later they're arresting people saying they didn't get out of there in time. That's not enough time. They need to give you the opportunity to comply, sufficient amount of time to do so, and a clear place to go, right? So they should be sort of like, not shepherding, but essentially just like guiding people, not trying to herd them and corral folks, using these methods that we're going to talk about later. And also, people who are demonstrating should receive like a detailed reason why. They should hear that. They should be able to know you need to disperse because X, Y, and Z, to make sure that that's communicated properly and not done so through intimidation or just pure force. So with that said, there are some things to kind of look out for that, again, being informed is one thing, but also making sure you're being vigilant is another. And so looking out for these things will kind of help you be prepared in case of anything, right? In case of emergency or in case of congratulations, whichever way it goes. So things to look out for: you want to look for the kinds of enforcement that are present. So I usually do that through difference between uniforms and differences in cars present. Any sort of presence of atypical weapons. So like, are there tear gas canisters versus tasers? Like, what kinds of things are you not expecting from law enforcement that you're seeing? Taking note of the names of law enforcement, license plates of law enforcement, if possible. Photos are really good for this. Taking note of times and locations that things are happening, trying to like timestamp stuff as best you can. This is why videos are so useful, is because it can kind of do that for you, and listening for how commands are given and when they're given, and then noting the use of force. So just to share with you some police tactics we have seen during demonstrations, there have been tear gas deployed. In Milwaukee, we've also seen them wearing riot gear, which I'm going to show a picture in a few moments. And also, we've seen instances of law enforcement covering their badges, pointing weapons, refusing conversation, and also using what might be, you might think they're tanks. They're also called MRAPs, or mine resistant ambush protected vehicles. They look like a Jeep Wrangler on steroids, in case nobody's seen them. But they can be branded with like National Guard. They can be branded with police departments. These sort of vehicles we have seen during demonstrations. So this next part, I'm just going to share with you some pictures. So folks who might not have gone to a demonstration or haven't seen this kind of things before can kind of prepare themselves, because it's really difficult to kind of take all of this in if the first time you've seen it is at a demonstration. So using these pictures can kind of help prepare you mentally for some things. So taking a look at this picture here, we'll see that they have these helmets on. They also have like these, I mean, I call them billy clubs, but I think they have a different name. But they have, their batons, and they're kind of holding it in sort of a antagonistic way. And then we're also making note of their weapons, but also take a look. We see the cell phone here. It's covering up this officer's name tag, which is not okay. You need to know the name of the officers, as well as this backpack strap here is also covering up this officer's name tag. So that would make it really hard to try to file a report. Luckily, we can see their badge numbers or their badges. But just look out for those things as well as you're documenting to see, can I even see this person's name? Who is this person? We can also, there are additional pictures where you can kind of see their full outfit, so I'll go through that later. But just to kind of share with you how Stingray works, it intercepts your cell phone signal, so it can intercept some data that you're transmitting, and again, it can track your location. So being mindful of whether or not your location is on. I know some demonstrators might want to use a location tracking app for their friends, like Find My Friends, or I use Life 360. Sometimes my mom can track me, but it's kind of like you might want to keep those things off, because the police can also use those to track you, and they can also use whatever tower that your cell phone is trying to ping to in order to triangulate where you are. So just be really careful. Again, download apps like Signal or Telegram. They use end-to-end encryption to lessen the risk of that. Additionally, we haven't seen LRADs, but I just wanted to share this quick little informational graphic about it. We have heard of LRADs being used in other places across the United States, so want to make sure it kind of looks like an old, I liken it to an old television or radio station van that drives through. It looks like a satellite dish, but it's actually a speaker, and it can put off really high decibel, high frequency sounds that can cause physical pain, or also, at worst cause hearing damage. So keep a lookout for those kinds of things. We haven't seen them in Wisconsin, but if you're trying to demonstrate outside of Wisconsin or across the United States, you might see some of these. So keep an eye out. Again, showing you more photos, we can kind of see these knee guards they have on, these shields they have on their faces. Just keep it in mind the kinds of tools that we might see. They have it in like these utility bags that they have. So just taking a look at the kinds of armor and the kinds of clothes that they have on. Also, on this note, as I go through these photos, I'm also going to note that since the DNC is happening in Milwaukee, there is a chance that there's going to be different factions, for lack of a better word, of law enforcement, right? So the National Guard came to Milwaukee during the protests that happened during June. And so there's a possibility the National Guard will return. Additionally, there might be other law enforcement agencies from different counties in Wisconsin coming in to sort of supplement the Milwaukee Police Department. So just making sure you're recognizing like the different kinds of uniforms that are going to be present is going to be even more important during the DNC, because it will be possible that there will be multiple kinds of law enforcement present. So we've talked about things to look for, things that you should know beforehand, but it's after the fact, and maybe your rights have been violated. You've been in a very difficult encounter with law enforcement. What do you need to know? The common tip is to treat it like a break-in or car accident or really any sort of traumatic event. Try to write down, record as much as possible that you can. So if there's an injury, take pictures of that immediately. If there is any sort of interaction with law enforcement, try to have somebody record that, get contact information of witnesses, try to get as much as you can so that you can file a written complaint. Filing a written complaint is really important for multiple reasons. The main ones that are coming right off the top of my head is that in Milwaukee, if you don't file a complaint, it can make it difficult for you to pursue legal action and in the aftermath of an event. So filing a complaint immediately after can make your process of filing, pursuing legal action a lot easier. But then two, it creates a paper trail. Oftentimes, honestly, there might not be immediate action that happens after a complaint is filed, but as we've seen during other instances of police misconduct, oftentimes this person that did this one action of police misconduct that got national widespread attention, it wasn't their first time, and that's because people had filed complaints and had created a paper trail that showed not only was this one officer not compliant, it was the entire department, or it shows a flaw in the entire system of law enforcement in these cities. So please file a written complaint as soon as you can after your rights have been violated. Make sure you have people who you trust, who you can reach out for legal advice, or at least like a person you trust who can connect you with people to give you legal advice so that you can get the things you need. So a few helpful phrases I want to leave you with are: I don't consent to search of my person or property. This is really helpful, especially when you might be subject to like a pat down. If you're encountering police during a demonstration for whatever reason, either lawfully or unlawfully, or if there's questions about your cell phone and whether or not your cell phone can be taken, like you don't consent to search of your person or property. Another question to ask is, am I being detained or am I free to go? Sometimes, police might be asking questions in a manner and it makes it seem like you're going to be detained, but they're not. They're just trying to get more information. Law enforcement isn't trying to detain you. They're just trying to get more information. So asking this question really helps send a signal. Hey, like, this is not okay. I cannot answer these questions. I want to know, am I being detained or am I free to go? And then another phrase that's helpful is, I don't wish to talk to you without a lawyer. It might not necessarily stop questions from being asked, right? Or it might not put you in a better situation, to be honest. But knowing these phrases will help signal, oh, this person knows a little bit more than I took for granted, right? So when you're in these situations, it might help send a signal that you're prepared in ways that maybe the law enforcement officer didn't think you would be. So remember, in these situations, there's going to be a lot of emotions, anything ranging from joy to anger to frustration to fear. So particularly when it comes to being in situations with law enforcement, try to be calm and collected, take those deep breaths. As much as it can be difficult, because I know that law enforcement isn't always polite or respectful, and honestly, even if they were, that doesn't change anything. Try your best to be polite or respectful. I know we have talked about respectability politics, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're any less worthy of having your civil rights and civil liberties maintained, right? But the reality is you are playing sort of a chess game. So if being polite and respectful is a strategy, it's a strategy you can use. Again, you have the right to refuse your searches. Try your hardest to listen for what law enforcement is saying to you, and don't get tricked, don't get wrapped up into saying something more than you need to say in order to leave the situation safely. Again, that question, am I being detained or am I free to go, is a really important question to ask. Don't run if you can. There might be a situation where like police are trying to tell you to vacate a space and maybe it feels better to run, but if at all possible, don't run, because that we have seen that escalate situations. Don't touch a cop. They have what is considered a lunge distance of about 16 feet. 6 feet, or what I call COVID distance, is like a good starting point, but they might ask you to back up an additional 10 feet. Have I ever seen a person lunge 16 feet? No, but that's the distance that is preferred in between quote unquote civilians and law enforcement. So try your best to keep that distance at all times. And if that space has been encroached by a law enforcement officer, really, again, try to be calm and not touch the officer, because it can lead things to escalate again. And then if there is misconduct, treat it like a car accident. Try to remember everything that happened, write it down, record it, contact witnesses, get as much information as you can, and then file that complaint. In Milwaukee, this is how you can do so. Our police chief recently underwent a little shakeup, so it's acting Chief Brunson. Hopefully I didn't spell that name wrong. If I did spell it wrong, this information is still accurate. The Milwaukee Fire and Police Commission is the governing board that oversees our law enforcement agencies in Milwaukee. And I think that's all. We have some upcoming events. I'm going to share that in a moment, but are there any questions? And
we don't have any questions from folks in the Facebook yet. If people want to post them in the comments right now, I will relay them.
Yeah, don't be shy, y'all. Well, meanwhile, while we're generating those questions, I do want to share, we have a couple of things coming up. So stay tuned. We generally have our weekly Smart Justice Town Hall that happens. We're going to take a quick break. We took a break for today, I believe. So thanks to my team for letting me take their time slot. But next week, we're going to take a break for the DNC. So our next one will be August 26th, I believe. And then we are hiring for a Rights for All regional organizer. Regional organizers, plural. We're looking in 4 regions. You can take a look on our website if you go to, my brain. If you go to careers, you can go to like the ACLU of Wisconsin's page. I believe it's the About Us section. And then you click on careers, you'll see a job posting for this and you can learn more. If you're interested in being an organizer for a Rights for All campaign, which is centered around voting, in organizing folks around voting, please apply. Send your resume and cover letter to jobs@aclu-wi.org. We would love to have more folks apply, especially in this current COVID time is really bringing to light a lot of the issues that have always existed within our voting system within the United States. So it would be great to have some dedicated folks. I know it pays $18 an hour. Typically, your workload is 5 hours a week. So I would think it's a great job for maybe a college student or an 18-year-old high school student, maybe who just graduated, who has a car and can drive, to kind of really garner a larger group of people and prepare them to vote in the November election or any other election, because voting is really important. It's one way that we can do that. So we have no questions. Okay, that's fine. We don't have questions now, but I know questions come up later. So if you're watching this in the future or you're watching this presently, maybe you're shy, here are the ways that you can keep in touch with us. We have our Facebook page. We also have our Twitter and our Instagram page. Hit us up. But here's also my email. So if there's any questions, especially with young people, if there are any questions for high school students, as well as college students about any of this demonstrating rights or any other issues, I would welcome that in my inbox. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to be in service of folks and make sure that they have all the knowledge and the tools that they can to be engaged in their community as effectively as possible. So reach out to us, y'all. We're here.